Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of The Wade Foster Show. And today we are going to be diving into the world of peptides. Peptides are absolutely everywhere right now. They are being discussed on podcasts, prescribed by longevity clinics, sold online as research chemicals, and promoted as potential solutions for everything from weight loss, injury, recovery, sleep, inflammation, cognitive performance, anti-aging, etc., etc., etc. Now, I have personally used 2 peptides and I'm going to be experimenting with a third. So I have personally used BPC 157 and TB 500, known as the Wolverine stack. For anyone that doesn't know comic books, Wolverine basically couldn't die because his cells regenerated, so he healed himself. So BPC 157 and TB 500 are known as basically a regenerative peptide stack. I have arthritis in my left shoulders from years of strongman training and training through injury. And I used them both when I was recovering from my arthritis, basically trying to manage the pain in my shoulder because steroid injections and it was hydrochloric acid, one of the acids in my shoulder didn't really do much, but the peptides did help. And then I am going to be experimenting with retatrutide over the next couple of weeks. As one, I don't like recommending anything I haven't taken myself, and I'm intrigued by a lot of the research and a lot of what people are saying out there. But there's an important distinction that I want to kind of make clear. The stuff that's different, like me saying I've used something and felt it helped me, isn't the same as like this is a proven drug that is safe and effective. Those are not the same statements, right? So in today's episode, I want to give you a balanced and honest guide to peptides. Basically, what are they? How do they supposedly work? Why are some peptides approved medicines while others exist in a legal and medical kind of gray area? What has recently happened with the FDA and peptides? Because RFK Jr. is pretty pro quite a few peptides. Is the lack of approval simply because pharmaceutical companies cannot make enough money from them? And most importantly, should you consider using them? This episode, though, is not medical advice. I am not recommending that anybody purchase or inject any unapproved substances. The objective is to help you understand the difference between genuine scientific promise, personal anecdote, and proven medicine. So let's dive in. What exactly is a peptide? So let's start with the basics. A peptide is essentially a short chain of amino acids. Amino acids are often described as the building blocks of protein. When a relatively small number of amino acids are linked together, we generally call that structure a peptide. Longer and more complex chains form proteins. Your body produces thousands of peptides naturally. Many of them act as biological messengers. They can tell cells to release hormones, control appetite, regulate blood sugar, produce collagen, influence inflammation, repair tissue, or even communicate with the brain. Therefore, the word peptide does not describe one type of treatment. It describes an enormous category of molecules. Saying, are peptides safe is a little like asking, are medicines safe? Which medicine? At what dose? For which person? For what condition? And manufactured by whom, right? Insulin. So diabetes, right? So like diabetes, insulin is a peptide hormone. GLP-1 is a peptide hormone. Several FDA-approved fertility drugs, metabolic medicines are peptide-based. Therefore, peptides themselves are not inherently experimental, illegal, or dangerous. The real question is what evidence exists for the particular peptide you're interested in, produced to what standard, for what particular person or purpose, right? So why are some peptides like FDA approved and others are not? So we've got to dive into FDA approval. To receive FDA approval, a pharmaceutical company generally has to establish several things. First, the drug needs to be properly identified and consistently manufactured. Second, preclinical research is normally required, including laboratory and animal work. Third, it must progress through human clinical trials. So phase 1 generally focus on safety, how tolerable it is, and dosages. Phase 2 asks whether the treatment appears to work and continues assessing safety. And phase 3 usually involves much larger groups and companies the drug against a placebo or an existing treatment, right? The company must then submit the full package of evidence to the FDA. And then the FDA evaluates whether the drug's benefits outweigh its risk for a defined population. Okay. The process can take years, and cost an enormous amount of money. This leads to a popular claim, like peptides like BPC 157 is not approved because it cannot be patented, so nobody will pay for the trials. Why can it not be patented? Because it's produced in the body. So there may be an element of truth to this claim. A lot of big pharma companies don't chase the peptide route because they can't be patented, so they can't make money off of them. But that statement is too simplistic. Large clinical trials are expensive, right? A company needs a commercial reason to fund them. If a molecule is difficult to protect intellectually, already widely available, or unlikely to produce a sufficient return, attracting investment will prove difficult. Like raising company, right? Company raising funds, right? Seed funding, etc. But lack of funding does not prove that something works or doesn't work. And it does not prove that something is safe or unsafe. Sometimes a treatment lacks approval because nobody has funded the necessary research. Sometimes it lacks approval because the compound has not been sufficiently categorized. Sometimes the existing data is just weak. Researchers may not have identified clear medical indication. So it is wrong to say it is unapproved only because big pharma cannot make money. However, the commercial model influences what gets studied. So that's to be aware of when it comes to FDA. So we don't want to look at FDA approval versus pharmacy compounding. So this distinction is pretty critical. An FDA approved drug has been reviewed for safety, effectiveness, manufacturing, quality, and specific intended use. A compounded drug is different. Compounding is the preparation of a customized medication for an individual patient. For example, a patient may require a dose that is not commercially available, a formulation without a particular allergen, or a different delivery method. Compounded medicines can serve an important clinical purpose, but compounded drugs are not individually reviewed and approved by the FDA in the same way commercially approved products. That brings us to the recent peptide headlines, if any of you have been following the news recently. On the 3rd or 24th of July this year, the FDA's Pharmacy Compounding Advisory Committee discussed several peptides, including 2 that I have taken, BPC 1. Basically, the committee narrowly, but still, voted in favor of recommending BPC 157, TB 500, and KBV to be placed on the list of substances eligible for certain forms of pharmacy compounding. This is significant, okay? But it is not the same as the FDA declaring these peptides are proven safe and effective. The vote was a recommendation about whether pharmacies should potentially be allowed to compound them under certain circumstances. So the FDA is not required to follow the committee's recommendation. And even if the recommendation is implemented, BPC 157 and TB 500 would remain unapproved drugs. Okay? So the committee has said we're willing to approve them. The FDA hasn't made a decision yet, but even if it is, they're not to be FDA approved drugs. It's to be able to use in compounding circumstances. So that's just a bit of the legality around them and why maybe some are FDA approved, some aren't FDA approved, etc. But what I wanted to go through today is obviously some of the ones that I've taken, some of the most popular ones you are seeing right now, and potentially ones you have taken or are considering taking or have heard people take. Let's start with BPC 157, the best known recovery compound. So BPC stands for Body Protection Compound. BPC 157 is a synthetic peptide made up of 15 amino acids. It is based on a peptide sequence associated with proteins found in gastric juice. So you know how your gut produces acid and it doesn't burn holes in your gut? It's because of BPC 157. So BPC 157 is commonly promoted for tendon healing, ligament recovery, muscle injuries, gut health, inflammation, joint pain, and faster recovery after surgery. Again, why I used it on my shoulder. Preclinical studies suggest that BPC 157 may influence several biological processes associated with tissue repair. These include blood vessel formation, nitric oxide pathways, cell migration, inflammatory signaling, and tendon to bone healing. What this simply means in plain English is it may influence some of the systems the body uses to move repair cells into damaged tissues and rebuild that tissue. So this sound, but here is the issue, or let's say the limitation. The overwhelming majority of evidence comes from animal experiments, cell studies, and mechanistic research. There is a major difference between improving tendon healing in a rat and proving that an injected compound safely repairs a human Achilles tendon. Human evidence remains extremely limited. However, there are anecdotes, there are clinician reports, there are people, myself included, who believe they experienced improved recovery due to using the compound. But there are not yet large, high-quality, randomized human trials establishing the best dose, the best delivery method, which injuries respond well, which injuries don't respond well, how long it should be taken for, the long-term risks, and whether the effect exceeds a placebo or natural recovery. You just get anecdotal feedback from people. The FDA has previously stated that compounded BPC 157 may present concerns and risks relating to peptide impurities and manufacturing characterization. The agency has also said that it lacks sufficient safety information to determine whether BPC 157 would cause harm when administered to. So it doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean it's harmful. It doesn't mean it's dangerous. It means the evidence is insufficient to conclude that it is safe. Like, that distinction matters. My experience. I've used it in line with TB500, the Wolverine stack, and my shoulder was less painful. For a period of time in my life, I could not open cabinets that were above my shoulder height. I could not get my left shoulder that high. I couldn't sleep on that side. I actually really struggled with sleep due to pain. And BPC 157 and TB500 helped. However, could it be placebo? Quite possibly. The placebo effect is very, very real in lots of things. There's the old steroid study, where basically there were two groups of people. One were told they were given Anavar, which is basically a steroid, and one were given a placebo pill, when both were actually given the placebo pill. The group that thought they were on Anavar built more muscle because they trained harder, right? Because they thought they were on Anavar. They thought they were on a steroid. So they trained harder, which meant they build more muscle, be more strength. There's also the pain medication placebo effect, where basically certain pain medications like Advil or Nurofen and stuff like that will claim to be targeted for a certain area. So like period pain or headaches or stomach aches or joint pain, etc., when it's actually the exact same active ingredients. But if you're taking something that you believe to help alleviate a certain type of pain rather than just general pain, it alleviates that pain better, right? So the placebo effect is real. So could it have been that? Potentially. So that's just food for thought for you all. Other one that I obviously used in line with BPC 157 was TB500, which I said is called the Wolverine stack. So basically, TB500 is a synthetic peptide, which is basically thymosin beta 4, naturally occurring protein involved in cell movement, tissue repair, inflammation, blood vessel formulation. So very similar to BPC. And it is, again, generally promoted for muscle and tendon recovery, flexibility, reduced inflammation, wound healing, and recovery from soft tissue injuries. That's information on those. Again, I've used them. I will probably use them again. However, I'm my own test subject. You would be your own test subject. The other one that is doing real big rounds at the moment is retatrutide. So retatrutide belongs in a very different scientific category to BPC 157 and TB 500. Although people group them all together as peptides, retatrutide has undergone large pharmaceutical clinical trials. What's the company? Eli Lilly? Yeah. Doing a study basically for a once a weekly drug, right? So basically it's in further stages of development. Retatrutide is often described as a triple agnostic because it activates 3 hormone receptors: GLP-1, GLP, and glucagon. So to understand why that matters, think about each receptor as pulling a different metabolic lever. So let's dive into these. GLP-1, which we all know about these GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic, Wegovy, etc. GLP-1 signaling can reduce appetite, increase feelings of fullness, slow gastric emptying, and improve glucose-dependent insulin secretion. This is the part of the mechanism used in drugs such as semaglutide that we discussed, right? You then get GLP, which is a GLP also affects insulin secretion and energy regulation. And then trizepatide activates both GLP and GLP-1 receptors, okay? Whereas semaglutide is just GLP-1. Then you get glucagon. So glucagon is usually associated with increasing blood glucose during fasting, but glucagon receptor activity may also increase energy expenditure and influence fat metabolism. So retatrutide combines all 3 pathways in one molecule. This is why people call it a triple G. Now, what do we know about retatrutide? So in the original phase 2 obesity trial, participants receiving the highest tested dose experienced an average body weight reduction of approximately 24% after 48 weeks. Since then, phase 3 results have been more striking. In Lilly's Triumph 1 phase 3 trial, adults with obesity taking the highest dose lost an average of approximately 28% of their body weight over 80 weeks. In an extension involving some participants with a starting BMI of at least 35, the reported average weight loss reached approximately 30% at 104 weeks. Another phase 3 study involving participants with obesity and knee osteoarthritis reported an average weight reduction of approximately 29% at the highest dose after 68 weeks. These are incredibly substantial results. We are entering territory that begins to approach the magnitude of weight loss historically associated with surgery for some patients. This is why retatrutide is attracting much more attention right now. Now, is retatrutide FDA approved? At this time, no. Retatrutide remains in investigation. Okay. It has produced successful phase 3 results, which I just went through, but successful trials and FDA approval are not the same thing. The manufacturer must complete the required program, submit the evidence, and basically receive regulatory authorization. But Eli Lilly are funding it and going for it. Anyone selling retatrutide online is not selling an FDA-approved retatrutide product. So this means if you are looking to get a lot of these peptides online, are you actually getting what it says is in it? There is no way of knowing because this is not an FDA approved product. So the FDA has issued warning letters to businesses basically marking retatrutide and similar investigational studies as unapproved new drugs. So be wary if you are going to look into getting Peptides. What are the risks of retatrutide? So the most commonly reported basically adverse effects in the trials have been gastrointestinal, so nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, constipation, reduced appetite. These effects have generally been more common during dose escalation, like trying to find the highest dose, and so at higher doses. Because retatrutide activates the glucagon receptor as well as GLP-1 and GLP receptors, heart rate changes and other metabolic effects are also being closely examined. So has some side effects. Next, to be aware of with any of these, and I've done a podcast on GLP-1s before, muscle loss is big with retatrutide and a lot of these things because the appetite suppressant. So you stop eating. So you need to make sure you are training effectively and you eat enough protein and you are eating actually enough calories to support muscle maintenance or muscle gain. Otherwise, you will just be losing a lot of weight and muscle will be a big part of that. So I can't give you guys any note on it personally because I haven't tried it, but I am trying it because I've had a lot of clients ask about it and I won't ever just kind of, let's say, I can't give any feedback unless I've tried it. So I've had a lot of people ask for it. So I'm going to be doing a 6-week go on it to see if I see any changes in appetite, in physique, if it makes dieting any easier, etc. The last bit is the peptide quality problem, which I've discussed kind of a little bit earlier. So for me, this is pretty much one of the most important parts of this whole discussion for anyone looking to get onto peptides. When a substance is not available as an approved pharmaceutical product, people often source it from research chemical websites, overseas laboratories, online peptide suppliers, wellness clinics, and then a label saying 99% purity is not like the same as an independent verification, right? It could be complete BS. A product could theoretically contain the correct peptide at a high chemical purity and still be unsafe to inject, right? Bacterial contamination, endotoxins, poor handling, incorrect storage, particle contamination, inaccurate dosing. Peptides can also be difficult to manufacture and characterize. It's proceed with caution. Like that is part of what the FDA means when it raises the issue of kind of safety right now with the products that are on the market. So even though peptides are produced in the body, like the body may recognize the substance as foreign and produce an immune response. That response could be mild or theoretically it could make it more serious. So when people say, oh, I know a reliable supplier, what does reliable actually mean? Does the supplier provide, batch specific independent testing? Does that test confirm identity, concentration, purity, how sterile it is, and endotoxin levels? Can the chain of custody be verified? Is the laboratory appropriately accredited? What was the vial stored correctly after testing? Certificate posted on a website does not automatically answer those questions. So be careful when you are looking to get peptides and peptides online or peptides from the big guy at the gym. So to help you guys out, are peptides safe? The honest answer is some peptide medicines have well-characterized safety profiles for approved uses. Some experimental peptides look promising but have insufficient evidence. And some products sold as peptides may create additional risks because their identity and quality is basically uncertain. So safety is also not binary. Paracetamol can be safe at appropriate dose and extremely dangerous at excessive doses. Testosterone can be medically appropriate for one person and inappropriate for another. So even an approved drug can produce serious side effects. So with the stuff that I've suggested, like BPC, or not suggested, the stuff that I've discussed, with BPC 157 and TB 500, there is not enough human data to confidently calculate the benefit to risk ratio. It is at your own risk to take those products. With retatrutide, the evidence base is much stronger and expanding rapidly, but it remains in investigation. Okay, so yes and no is the answer, which is where we are currently. It's why I wanted to give you guys this episode. So many people are, yes, they're great, or no, they're awful. There's just not enough evidence right now. And I know it might not be the best news for a lot of people and they're like, want a yes or no answer. There just isn't a yes or no answer. A lot of things we do to our body is up to us, right? You choose what you put in your body. I put alcohol in my body. Alcohol's a poison. There is no net benefit from alcohol's really freaking bad for me. And I put it in my body. A lot of you put bad people, a lot of you eat fast food. McDonald's does nothing good for you, but you still put it in your body. Again, I'm not pushing the use of peptides, not at all. Everyone should do their own research. And this podcast is there to help you guys with the understanding of do your own research. There is not enough evidence out there. If you feel you have pain and you want to look at the Wolverine stack, if you feel you are struggling with appetite and you want to look at maybe retatrutide, look into them. However, there are the famous peptides that we know about. So semaglutide and tirzepatide, the GLP-1s that we all know about, Ozempic, Wegovy, etc. These are useful because they demonstrate what happens when peptide-based treatments go through proper drug development. So as I said, semaglutide is a GLP-1 receptor agonist, and tirzepatide activates GLP and GLP-1 receptors. Both have FDA-approved products for specific indications. They have large clinical trial programs, formal prescribing information, standardized manufacturing, known dosage schedules, adverse event reporting, and ongoing safety monitoring. That does not make them perfect. There is still not super long-term studies to know what the effects of them long-term. But it does make the benefit-risk conversation far more informed than it is for a research peptide sold online. Other ones to potentially note that have people bring up to me are CJC and ipamorelin. These are often used, these are basically the bodybuilding, muscle building peptides. So these are often used in an attempt to stimulate basically what's called growth hormone release, at which people use them or promote them for muscle growth, fat loss, recovery, sleep, anti-aging, etc. Basically, by increasing growth hormone and IGF-1 signaling is not automatically beneficial. Potential issues may include like fluid retention, joint symptoms, blood sugar issues, insulin resistance, carpal tunnel type symptoms. So the FDA has identified serious adverse events associated with CJC 1295, including increased heart rate and systemic reactions. So again, advance with caution. So should lack of approval stop all use? This is where the conversation comes a bit more nuanced, especially if you follow stuff online. There is a lot of anecdotal data, especially from people I respect in the space. I respect and I like in the space. There is a lot of anecdotal data about these products, these peptides, and how they're helping people. So what are my recommendations? So here is my honest position after using a couple, looking into the research and speaking to people about it. Number one, do not confuse popularity with evidence. A peptide can be used by thousands of people and still lack reliable safety data. A large number of anecdotes can identify an interesting signal. They cannot rule out bias, placebo, selective reporting, or rare adverse events. So just because you see it a lot online doesn't mean that it's evidence. Put this in any world. There's a lot of people who do keto. Keto's no better than any other diet. Right, there's a lot, and I know this is not the same as like injecting a peptide and a diet, but there's a lot of people who swear by high intense training. Other people swear by supersets. Other people swear by like, just because a lot of people do it doesn't mean it's great, doesn't mean it's the only solution. Number two, you've got to look at separating the molecule from the product. So retatrutide manufactured for a clinical trial is not necessarily equivalent to a vial labeled as retatrutide on a random research website. BPC 157 discussed in an animal study is not necessarily equivalent to every compounded or imported product bearing that name. Quality and sterility matter. Number three, if you are going or intrigued by peptides, use a qualified medical professional, like not a social media influencer, not me, right? Not a salesman earning commission on peptide packages. I'm not earning any commission. I have zero affiliation to any company. Like ideally speak to a physician who understands peptides, understands the compound, your medical history, and is willing to discuss the uncertainty with you. Next, do not use peptides to avoid fixing the fundamentals. So if you sleep 5 hours a night, if you drink more than 3 days a week, if you eat poorly, if you never strength train, if you continually overload an injured tendon, peptides, be like supplements. Peptides aren't the solution. The solution is fix your lifestyle. If your weight has increased because your lifestyle is entirely reactive, retatrutide may reduce appetite, but it will not automatically build a sustainable routine. This is the biggest issue with a lot of GLP-1s. So a lot of research recently into GLP-1s is that it has a bounce back effect, a bit like what dieting has, right? So 95% of people that start a diet end up heavier 12 months later, right? They lose weight and then they end up heavier. Same with GLP-1s. A lot of people who are losing a substantial amount of weight on GLP-1s come off the drug and then end up putting all the weight back on. It does not change lifestyle. It can help with lifestyle change, because if you suppress your appetite while you're trying to eat a healthier lifestyle, you get less cravings for sugar, for alcohol and stuff like that. But it does not fix the fundamentals. It does not change the lifestyle. You have to change the lifestyle and use these things kind of as supplements. 5, be particularly cautious with injectable research products. Injecting a substance bypasses many of the body's protective barriers. So contamination that might be less consequential on your skin or in a digestive system could become significantly more serious when injected, and peptides are injected. If any of you listening are athletes, like stay away. BPC 157 is prohibited by the World Anti-Doping Agency under its category for non-approved substances. So if you are an athlete, like, you'd stay away. So here's a central lesson. Like, peptides are neither magic nor nonsense. Some are established medicines. Some may be transformative medicines. Some have fascinating animal research, but almost no convincing human data. And some may never live up to their marketing hype. I've used a couple. I've had positive experiences, and I'm not embarrassed to say that. But I also refuse to pretend that my experiences proves that they are safe for everyone, or that the vial I used was the equivalent to a regulated, approved pharmaceutical product. I think we can be optimistic about emerging medicine without becoming reckless. I think it's amazing where this medicine could go, but nothing fixes lifestyle. The sensible position is not peptides are dangerous, and it's not peptides are a miracle drug that everyone should take and they're being hidden from you. But there is real potential here. There are also real unknowns. Understand both before making a decision, because when it comes to your health, curiosity is valuable. But certainty without evidence is dangerous. And the more powerful the intervention, the more seriously we should take that distinction. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. A bit of a more scientific deep dive from me. I've not done one of these for a while, but I've had a lot of clients asking about peptides. So I thought it would be worth doing a bit of a podcast to give you guys some more information on what they are, what to research, my thoughts and views on it, etc. So I hope you all enjoyed that episode. If you have any questions on peptides, on health, on longevity, please, the best place to get me is on LinkedIn. I will leave my LinkedIn URL in the bio. So just click on that and drop me a message. Or if you are interested in hiring us as executive health advisors. So me and my company, Executive Performance Coaching. If you are tired of spinning the wheel and you want to get expert guidance on how to optimize your health and lifestyle to look better, feel better, and live longer, then please use the call link. I believe it'll be a Calendly link in the description to book an introductory call. The link in the podcast description is direct with me, not any of my team. So if you want to speak one-on-one with me and not one of my team, please use the link in the podcast description. Hope you guys all have an excellent week. Peace.